Okay, good. I've been teaching for, I guess, finished up 23 years now, getting ready to enter year 24. And throughout that time, what I have been doing is trying to change the environment that my students walk into. So as we transition from full-time face-to-face instruction to distance learning, or in some districts, hybrid learning models, the way we approach educating our students, our scholars, our children has to be revamped. Among many of the struggles that I heard from parents when school closures happened in March, the abrupt school closures in March, was how do I create an environment in my home conducive to learning in a space that is traditionally reserved for relaxation and family time. And as we open this next school year with distance learning being the primary mode of education in many districts across the country for an extended period of time, this challenge becomes even more daunting, as many of the outlets our children had are either closed or limited due to the pandemic. As adults, we can attest to the need of having a space where we can step away from working in a working environment and decompress. So this is important for our children too. So what I want to introduce to you today, and I'll share my screen, is a concept known as flexible seating. So let me get that up for you. Let's see there. All right. Can you all see that yet? Are you able to see it?
Yes, yes.
All right. All right, so we're going to talk about what flexible seating is. So when we talk about, first of all, flexible seating, we're talking about a shift from the traditional model of classroom design that many of us were accustomed to one that's less rigid and provides some degree of student choice. Now, many of us were accustomed to this model, that we were educated in spaces that looked like this. Desks were in rows and columns with a teacher on doing what we call being the sage on stage in front of the room. And what I hear so many adults say is, well, that worked for me, so why not continue with that? And my answer to that is, we are dealing with students who are growing up in the information age, where gathering information doesn't require as much patience as it once did. So information on just about everything you want is available at your fingertips. People are accustomed to having everything that they want to know happening very quickly, and therefore they have shorter attention spans. We see this in adults all the time. Think about how you feel when you're on an app or we're trying to get on a web page and you see that color wheel starting to spin. How many seconds does it take before you're getting frustrated, like, come on already, as opposed to, I used to have to get up and go get an Encyclopedia Britannica and start looking stuff up. And this 3-second wheel is about to drive me bananas. So imagine what that's like for our students. We have to, gather and synthesize information much quicker now. And so because of that, because students are used to that rapid response, their attention spans are going to be shorter, they're going to be a lot more active. And this particular model of sitting in the desks tends to cause a lot of distractions. So let's talk about why flexible seating is important. Have you ever noticed a difference in your child's eating habits, for example, when they get to help cook or have some degree of choice in what they eat? You're less likely to spend dinner time fussing at them to finish their food because they made some decisions about what they were going to eat. Now, we know that that's not always possible. Sometimes you're just going to have to eat what's on the table. But we do notice the difference when we do present them with choice about how little argument we have to have with them to get them to finish. So when a student has choice, they feel more empowered. When a student has chosen where they would like to sit or relax or to engage in learning, they become more focused on the task. When students are comfortable, they don't spend time shifting in their seats. They're able to choose the type of seats that address how they need to move in order to learn. There are some students that have to move, and we've seen it. They just cannot sit still, whether it's a diagnosed case of ADD or ADHD, or they just are naturally fidgety and just don't like to sit for long periods of time. Well, having flexible seating allows them to be in a type of seat or a type of environment where they can move, but still focus on the work at hand. Okay. Flexible seating is a mind shift step. You really have to shift your thinking. And that was the most difficult part for me as a teacher, because some of my students, knowing they have to move, sometimes that movement happens in the middle of class where they're comfortable in this one seat, but then they got to move somewhere else. And the tendency is to be like, would you please just go sit down somewhere? And we have to let that go because it's just the energy in the room. So I had to let go and say, okay, this child is no longer able to function in this setting. He or she needs to move to another seat that suits them. And those seats are going to change based on what they're working on. And I had to be okay with that. So that was one of the major reasons I started to put in flexible seating in my classrooms. All right, we got a little freeze here, okay. So what does that look like then? I'm gonna show you a few pictures of what it has looked like for me throughout the years in my classroom, and then we'll transition to talking about what that can look like for you at home. So this was a middle school classroom for me. What I did is in one particular part of the room, I had a carpet laid down, I had a pillow that I had sewn myself. I got a couple of cushiony chairs, a lamp, and some fake plants to kind of create a more relaxing environment where students felt comfortable. Particularly with me teaching language arts and reading, some kids don't want to sit and read anything much longer than a paragraph. So when they have to do that real grueling work where they have to really concentrate, they need to be comfortable. This was my classroom this past year. At the beginning of the year, I had shifted some things around. But if you'll take note, you can kind of see the different types of seats that are available around the room. I'm hoping you all can see my mouse, but here you have this couch, for example. That's a convertible baby crib that I got off somebody off one of these let go, offer up type apps that they were practically giving away. And I just got a baby mattress, bought some sheets, and turned it into a couch. I have beanbag chairs here, which with high schoolers have flattened out rather quickly, but they were there. I had a lower table with yoga cushions around it. I had a dining table, a two-person dining table with dining room chairs and this I got absolutely free, believe it or not. Again, off one of those offer up, let go type of apps. I also have in the corner over here some foldable lawn chairs, the kind you might take with you, put in the back of your car if you're gonna go to an event. A couple of tables here, some cushions that you can buy at your local discount stores. So there are a lot of different things in the room. There's a trampoline chair back here somewhere, but I wanted to create an environment where people had choice. I did keep some of the traditional desks because there are some students that do function better in a traditional setting, and I wanted them to have that option. But even at those places, there are a few little changes. I don't know if you can see at this back set of tables here, there are cushions in the chairs, so they aren't sitting on the hard chair all day. On this set, there are bouncy bands for them to have on their feet, so some people are constantly moving their feet. There are also, I don't know if you can see them very well, there are Velcro strips, the rough side of a Velcro strip on the desk for my kids that have to fidget. Because one of the things for my fidgety kids is they're always tapping pencils, tapping pencils, tapping pencils, and my nerves can't take it. I've tried to take a deep breath and let them do it, and that's just the one thing I can't do it, I can't. So I had to give them something to do with their hands other than the pencils, because that was a no-go for me. So they have the rough side of the Velcro that they can scratch, they'll pick it up. I've had to replace it because they will peel it off, from time to time, but it's quiet and it keeps their hands busy. And so that's a substitution that I don't mind making. All right. Here I have some students working at some adjustable size desks. And if you'll notice that the chair that this student is in, it's leaning. So it's allowed to rock a little bit. So for students that don't like to sit perfectly still, and it was very popular with my boys that had longer legs, they can kind of stretch their legs out a little bit. They can rock a little without the danger of falling over. So we had that option. I had a set or some poofs set on a carpet back there where the students could sit back and read. So as you can see, here's another view of that section. So this particular student liked to move quite a bit. And it took quite a bit of patience for me to kind of get used to that. Because like I said, you have to relinquish a little bit of control with flexible seating. So he would sit here for a little while and work on his work. And when he got tired of that, he was on to the next seat. And this particular student liked the combination of the trampoline chair with the yoga ball. But as you can see, he's still working. So if he has to move from this spot to this spot to this spot to this spot, then I let him do that as long as work is being done. This particular student also liked the trampoline chair, but he didn't want the yoga ball. So he'll push it to the side so he can sit in a way that is comfortable for him. Here I have that same student and another student. They're standing on what's kind of like a balance ball. It's meant for your abs, but they worked out a system on their own where I didn't have to get involved at all, where he said, okay, when you lose your balance and fall off, then it's my turn. And that worked for them. So I didn't have to get involved in that at all. That was just something that they got to do on their own. And I was actually really pleased at how diplomatic they were. And the other thing I can say about it is having this type of environment made kids rush to class because it was first come, first serve. So in order to get the seat that they wanted, I had students that would traditionally drag their feet getting to class, moving a lot faster so that somebody wouldn't take the seat that they wanted. This was with my younger children. These are also bouncy bands. I think they came in a pack of 10 that allowed them to do something with their feet. So whether they were stretching in them or twisting them around, it gave them something to do that kept them in their seat. Because if there's one thing about little kids, they are constantly up. Teacher, Miss Braddock, Miss Braddock, Miss Braddock. And when they had these at their seat, they were less likely to get up and tap me, which is a pet peeve, but I got over it. I have this particular student working at a dining room table. It's a 2-seater table. Like I said, I didn't pay anything for this table at all. I think I paid for the cushions, but that seat covers. But the table and the chairs, I paid nothing for. You just got to dig a little bit. Sometimes you can find these things discounted or absolutely free. And that was a space that she liked to work in. So now that we've seen what it is, some of you all might say, okay, that's all well and good and that's all fun, but I already have a couch and I have a table and I have a few pillows and my kids don't want to use them. They don't want to sit at the dining room table and do their work. Well, I like those ideas, but I don't have the space or I don't have the additional income to be able to go out and get some of those things. So we can talk about how do we transition from that environment to home. One thing I can tell you is that my student that loved working at the dining room table in the classroom wanted nothing to do with the dining room table at home. Because it didn't feel different. It has a different impact being in the classroom than it does being at home. So we have to make room for that. How you handle flexible seating is going to be largely dependent on how your district is, how they're structuring the school day. So for example, in my district, we are having a full day from 8 to 2 with breaks in between. So because they'll be on the computer the entire time for the most part, with the exception of those breaks, we have to figure out what kind of environment am I going to put them in? Because that's a long time to be in front of a computer, even as an adult, especially if you're not used to having to do that. So one of the reasons we're going to talk about the transition is what works at school isn't going to be the same thing that works at home. At school, I made it more home-like. Well, when they get home, like, I already had this stuff. Like, this isn't special. Sitting on the couch doing my work is not special. Sitting at the dining room table doing my work is not special. It's boring. I don't want to do it. And it becomes a fight. And a lot of us are used to, you come home, maybe you take off your school clothes, put on your play clothes, eat a snack, and then you sit at the table, you do your work, 30 minutes, hour and a half, depending on what grade level you are, and then you go off about your day. Well, that's not going to be an option for our students now. First of all, there's nowhere for them to go when they finish. They wake up at home, they're going to do their work at home, and they're going to finish their day at home because nothing's open for them. And so we have to figure out, how do we take this sacred space and create learning spaces within there? All right. So for example, this particular student is working at a lap desk. This is something that can be done at home. Now, this for me does not look comfortable at all, but this was her preferred method of learning. You can do the same thing with a TV tray, okay? And that TV tray can be put on the floor to work as this student did, or it can be put on a table and become a standing desk. So it's something that has multiple uses. And one of the things I like about TV trays is that a lot of them are made from the same material as a student desk, which allows you to do this. I had my students that were working on the computer but used dry erase markers to write on the desks. And I found them more engaged, more willing to read and take notes because they liked the idea of being able to write on the desk. Same thing they would have done if it was on paper, but it felt less tedious because it was different, because it was new, and it made them more excited to actually do it. So if you have a TV tray, this is something that they can use. So in addition to having their computer in front of them, they can write on the surface. And you don't have to go out and buy a lap desk. TV trays can be found at some of your discount stores. And you may already have them. And like I said, with dry erase markers, there's no damage to it. They wipe right off with a napkin or a paper towel, no water is involved. All right. This is a reading cave. Believe it or not, all this is a wardrobe box that I got from U-Haul. I chose to paint it, but it's not necessarily necessary to do that. I just taped it up. I cut out a little arch for the students to be able to get in and out. And I put a little blow up, like a little blow up ottoman in there. I think it might've cost me $5 at the most, and covered it. And I put one of those touch lamps at the top. So when the students went and sat in there, they could turn the light on and they would sit in there and they would read. Some students chose to sit in there with a flashlight, but it gave them a space that was sacred and private, which is important for some of our children. Any space that's different will feel like a working space for them. Every time I move off my screen. Again, another blow up chair in this case. And this can be created whether you with even pool type of, when you have like pool inflatables. So for example, you might not want to go out and buy this particular chair, but you may have some pool inflatables already that you can use, and just you can transition those into seating spaces, throw a pillow on it, and now your child has a unique space to sit. And depending on, you know, of course, the age of your child would depend on the size of the inflatable you would need, but it's just some very basic things that we may already have that can now be flexible seating for our students. I mentioned having yoga balls in my classroom. I don't use them this way, but some of my students do. They put the laptop on the floor and then they want to stretch and roll around on the ball. Well, as long as they're not rolling all the way across the room, this is something that I allow them to do. And it gives them the opportunity to move. So for those students that just can't sit still and don't want to sit, this worked very well for some of them. All I did was provide the ball. How they used it was up to them. My only rule is you can't throw it and you can't bounce up and down too high, because you fall and you miss the ball, and then we got a problem. But other than that, how you use this, whether you sit on it like a chair, whether you lay across it, doesn't matter to me, but it gives them an opportunity to move a little bit, because some students just will not be able to sit still for hours at a time at a computer. Another use of yoga balls is or if you don't have a yoga ball, you can take a crate, you can take a blow up ball. You might have to let a little bit of the air out of it, and you drop it inside the crate, and that becomes a more stable seat, because some students, the younger kids, don't do well with the yoga balls because they can't quite get the rhythm of it and they'll slide off. But if you put a regular size play ball in a crate, you have the same effect. Okay, so they can be used in several ways. Instead of forcing your child to work at a table, consider letting them work under the table. I mean, the idea of sitting at a table is very rigid for students. But if you let them work under the table, same supplies, for whatever reason, going under the table feels completely different than sitting at the table. Plus, it allows you, if you're in the room, to do your work at the table and monitor them to some degree. Just let them set up their work supplies on the bottom and let them go for broke down there. You may also consider creating a reading corner somewhere in your room, a work corner. Now, this particular room is created by I think it's just hanging yarn. You can use yarn, you can use ribbon. I don't recommend streamers because those tear up really easily, but just finding a little space that you can corner off and make separate so that they have a space to go to that is only for the purpose of doing work. Okay? I would not recommend allowing a student to play in any of the areas that you have designated as workspaces, but I'll get into that in just a little bit. For younger children, you may even consider taking a storage bin that you have and creating a book boat where they can sit in it. If they have laptops, that laptop can sit right where these children's books are. Put a pillow in there and set them in there, and then they can sit and work in there. It becomes their own little sheltered space where they can work. You can create that same feeling with a laundry basket if your child is small enough. Obviously, if you have high schoolers, I don't recommend that. But if you have smaller children, they can sit in laundry baskets with their clipboards. If they're working on a computer, they're going to need a solid space where they can set their computer. But if they're just working with their books, their clipboards, or they've taken an assignment and have to go sit somewhere and work, this is an option for them. Sometimes you can just take a traditional chair, flip it upside down, and boom, now you have something completely different. Turn that chair upside down, your dining room chair, your kitchen chair, lay a pillow there, and now they've got a cocoon space to work in. They can rest their arms on the feet of the chair, and they can lay back and they can read. So that was another option that some of my younger students cared for. Now my high school students, that wasn't too much of a thing they were interested in, but my younger students definitely took a liking to that particular model. Right? And then you have your older students. The trick is creating an environment that just feels different. So you may want to consider, even if you have a workspace that's reserved for you in the house, swapping with your student. Let them work at the desk or in the home office if you have a home office, and then maybe you work at the table. And maybe not all the time, maybe say Monday and Wednesdays you have the office, you at the desk, Tuesdays, Thursdays, I've got it. And it allows them to feel a little more adult, because your older children are going to want to do something that makes them feel more executive-like. At least in my experience, that's what I've noticed. They will either want to lounge on the couch and do their work, or they're going to want to sit in bed, which I do not recommend. We'll get to that. But if they're allowed to sit in a space that looks like an office space, a professional space, they're more likely to focus. And like I said, if you switch off with them so that they can see that you're using it too, it'll sometimes change their mindset about having to sit in a more traditional setting. So as far as recommendations, I think it is very important as we look at how our homes, our sanctuaries are now also becoming workspaces. We have to keep a separate space that's especially reserved for relaxation and decompression. It's very important that students are not doing their work in bed. And as Dr. Johnson was speaking on, they need to be able to get up, get dressed, and move to a space that's designed for work, because you're going to run into the issue where when it's time to relax, they're not able to, because now they've associated that space with a working space. So wherever you choose to decide to let your child work, make sure that there's a space somewhere that has nothing to do with work at all, so that they can turn off, because nobody wants to be on all the time. It's not good for them mentally, psychologically. They need to be able to shut down, just like all of us do. I strongly recommend avoiding allowing children to work in their bed, particularly with teenagers, because that's going to be the thing that they want to do. Like, well, I'm doing my work. Why can't I just sit here? Why can't I just put my headphones in and listen to my music? For the same reasons Dr. Johnson said. Whatever it is you're listening to, unless you're listening to classical music, which is the only music that research states is good for children to listen to while they're working, then they need to take those headphones out. They need to get out of the bed, because there's something about physically getting up and changing spaces. And I found that even for me, when I was working on putting my presentation together, I wanted to lay up in bed and work on it, drink my coffee. What I really was doing when I sat up in bed was flipping back and forth to see what's on Amazon I haven't bought yet, what's on TV, who's doing what on social media, because I'm in my relaxation space. So I'm doing the things that I do when I'm relaxing, and then I'll come back to working. Or I would be very focused on working, and then it was time to shut down. I was antsy because I've been working in my relaxation space. So I highly recommend that the bedroom, I won't say the bedroom, I'll say the bed, be a place that's completely avoided. Now, if there's a space in their bedroom where you can kind of create some of these other things that I've shown you, that works. But there needs to be some place in the house that is a sanctuary where no work is being done. And for the spaces you do create for working, those need to be spaces reserved for working. So for example, if you did the ribbon streamer blocking off, or if you did the reading cave, no toys go in the reading cave. We don't go in there to listen to our iPods or get on TikTok or any of the things that the kids are doing now. That space has to be reserved for working, because there has to be a line somewhere, and it's not going to be easy. It is definitely going to be a struggle for us to take a relaxing family space and turn it into a workspace, and then turn it back into a home space. So in order to do that, we've got to be able to segregate those things some kind of way. So lastly, I'll end you with be patient. Give yourself and give your child grace. This is new for all of us. And what's going to work in one household isn't going to work in another. What's going to work with one child isn't going to work with the other. It is a learning curve. There were many things that I put out. I was like, well, the kids are going to love this. And my high school was like, I'm not using that. I don't like that. I was like, oh, but this is great. You got, no, I don't want that. I was like, but I really researched this and I like it. Like, yeah, okay, but we don't. So it's a learning curve. You're going to have to give yourself some time to try some things out. This is a trial and error period for us because it's new. This isn't something we've had to do. So like I said, not every idea is going to work with every child. So you may have one child that loves to sit at the desk. They're very focused. They need very little attention given to them and they're going to soar. The other one is going to say a little too antsy. They might want to roll around on that yoga ball while they're working. But as long as they're working, relinquish that control and let them do it. The only rule that I had in my classroom regarding my flexible seating is outside of Don't Tear It Up is you may sit wherever you like as long as you don't fall asleep. Because the minute you fall asleep, that particular flexible seating option is not available to you. I had another colleague in my building. We're the only two at the moment right now that use flexible seating. Her rule was every class you have to try a different seat so that you're not just married to one. Now, once you've kind of figured out what works, that's fine, but I want you to try out some different things. And I want you to recognize that not every seat works for every task. So depending on what you're working on, you may have to switch. And with our younger children that are, or even our older ones, you may even want to have a different space for every subject that they're doing. Maybe this is the space where I do my math. This is the space where I do my social studies. This is the space where I do my reading. So that they have the feeling of moving around and being in a different environment, particularly for students that are departmentalized and change classes. They're used to being in different rooms throughout the day. So I would definitely recommend that. So if you have, if you need some more ideas, you can look. I have started a Pinterest page that I put together particularly for this audience, where I'm going to be adding more and more ideas that I come across for flexible seating. There will also be things on there about learning activities that you can do that may not necessarily be academic. I know that there are some systems, I spoke to a friend of mine, where their children are going to be working pretty much from recorded lessons. So if their child finishes in 2 to 3 hours with the recorded lessons and they've got the rest of the day, the parent doesn't want them on YouTube all day, doesn't want them on the PS5 all day. What else can they do? So I'll be putting things in that space where there are other learning activities that don't necessarily have to be academic, but support academics. And you can also follow me on Twitter. As I come across things, I'll be posting things there. And it'll be at miss.dbraddock. Twitter doesn't use period, so it's miss_D_Braddock. Or if you need to reach me, you may also reach me by email. So my email is miss.dbraddock@gmail.com. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, follow me on Pinterest, or if you want to email me with questions or anything like that, I am definitely available for that. So just be sure to make sure that you give yourself and your children some room to try this out. This is something new for all of us. It's going to be a little bit frustrating in the beginning, and we just need to take some deep breaths and really try to find what works best for ourselves and for our own families. Okay? And that is all for me. So I will stop my screen share. And if anybody needs me to repeat at the end what my contact information is, I will do that for you.
Thank you so very much. We already have a question saved for you for our Q&A. So everyone's just gonna hang around. But just all positive comments so far. Thank you so very much.